Are you exhausted by the constant battle to control every aspect of your life? The relentless anxiety that shadows your days, and the gnawing uncertainty that steals your peace? I understand that profound weariness. For years, I lived tethered to the illusion of control, meticulously planning, strategizing, and striving, only to find myself increasingly overwhelmed, deeply frustrated, and ultimately profoundly unfulfilled. But within that struggle, I unearthed a transformative truth, a deceptively simple yet immensely powerful solution that holds the potential to fundamentally reshape your experience of life, ushering in a profound and enduring sense of peace and unwavering direction, even amidst the inevitable storms and unpredictable detours. It is the conscious, courageous, and continuous practice of learning to trust. Today, I want to share with you the intricate and deeply personal narrative of my own journey, a liberating passage from the constricting chains of anxiety and the ultimately futile pursuit of absolute mastery to the expansive freedom and quiet, resilient strength that resides within the embrace of unwavering trust. I will meticulously unveil the specific steps I undertook, the formidable challenges I encountered, the persistent doubts I wrestled with, and the profound and life-altering clarity I ultimately discovered. And it is my deepest hope that within the contours of my story, you too can find a tangible pathway towards cultivating greater serenity, fostering deeper resilience, and embracing a more trusting and ultimately more fulfilling engagement with the unfolding of your own unique and precious life. Before the transformative power of wholeheartedly entrusting my life to a force greater than myself began to take root and flourish in the depths of my being. My existence often felt like a precarious and utterly exhausting expedition through a dense and disorienting fog, with only the faintest and most unreliable of internal navigational tools to guide my faltering and uncertain steps. I was perpetually engaged in a relentless and ultimately self-defeating struggle against the inherent unpredictability and often bewildering chaos of life, constantly wrestling with significant decisions that loomed before me like insurmountable and ominous crossroads, each shrouded in a thick and impenetrable veil of uncertainty, with no discernible signposts, no reliable maps, and no trustworthy guides to indicate the seemingly elusive correct path or the ultimate destination. There were protracted and emotionally draining periods where I felt utterly and irrevocably disoriented, a pervasive and insidious sense of unease clinging to me like a persistent and unwelcome shadow that distorted every perception and poisoned every moment, and a gnawing and relentless undercurrent of profound doubt that relentlessly undermined any fragile sense of stability, eroded any fleeting glimmer of hope, and consistently sabotaged any tentative aspirations for meaningful forward momentum in any area of my life. My fundamental and deeply ingrained inclination, perhaps stemming from a deep-seated fear of vulnerability or a misguided belief in the absolute necessity of self-reliance as the ultimate virtue, was towards an almost obsessive and certainly unhealthy form of control, towards the meticulous and often mentally and emotionally exhausting crafting of intricately detailed plans that attempted to anticipate and account for every conceivable contingency, and unwavering and often anxiety-ridden exertion of what I believe to be absolute mastery over every conceivable variable and potential outcome, both internal and external. I took a misguided and ultimately self-destructive sense of pride in my perceived logical reasoning abilities, my analytical capabilities, and my staunch and often arrogant belief in my own capacity to dissect the inherent complexities of any given situation with cold, hard objectivity, and to invariably arrive at what I firmly and often stubbornly believed were the most rational, pragmatic, and unequivocally correct choices, both for myself and, often presumptuously, for those around me. However, what I gradually, and often through a series of profoundly humbling and sometimes deeply painful experiences, came to recognize with stark and undeniable clarity was the inherent and often insurmountable limitations of mere logic and cold, hard reason when confronted with the deeper, more profound, and often inherently irrational and emotionally charged uncertainties that permeate the very fabric of human existence and the intricate workings of the universe. Cold, objective facts and meticulously constructed intellectual arguments, while certainly valuable in their own domain, offered little genuine solace in the face of profound and inconsolable loss, provided no tangible and reliable guidance when grappling with the truly existential and often unanswerable questions about the fundamental meaning and ultimate purpose of life, and ultimately fell woefully short in addressing the deep-seated and often unspoken yearning within the human heart for something more transcendent, more meaningful, and more enduring than mere empirical understanding and rational, scientific explanation. The relentless and ultimately futile pursuit of absolute control, which I had for so long and so mistakenly viewed as a fundamental strength, a cornerstone of my competence, and an undeniable testament to my personal agency and self-determination, ultimately proved to be a treacherous and double-edged sword, fostering not the elusive sense of security, stability, and inner peace that I so desperately craved, but rather an escalating and self-perpetuating cycle of debilitating anxiety, profound disappointment, and bitter frustration when reality inevitably defied my carefully laid plans and stubbornly resisted my attempts at manipulation, and a pervasive and deeply ingrained sense of being fundamentally unfulfilled, profoundly disconnected from a more authentic and joyful way of being in the world, and increasingly isolated in my futile struggle against the natural flow of life. Consider, if you will allow yourself a moment of honest and perhaps uncomfortable introspection, those pivotal and often deeply painful junctures in your own life, when you poured an immeasurable and seemingly inexhaustible amount of precious energy, unwavering dedication, and profound emotional investment into a significant and deeply cherished endeavor. Perhaps a crucial and long sought-after career aspiration that represented years of hard work and sacrifice, the delicate and often turbulent landscape of a deeply significant and long-term personal relationship that formed a cornerstone of your emotional world, or a long-held and profoundly meaningful life goal that represented a deeply ingrained sense of purpose and aspiration, only to be confronted with the bewildering and often heartbreaking spectacle of seeing it inexplicably unravel and ultimately dissolve before your very eyes, often despite your most valiant and meticulously planned efforts to maintain control, to steer the situation towards a positive resolution, and to safeguard your investment of time, energy, and emotion. That crushing and deeply demoralizing feeling of utter helplessness, of carefully constructed plans dissolving into nothingness like ephemeral dreams fading with the harsh light of dawn, was a tragically and intimately familiar landscape in the often turbulent terrain of my own personal experience. A recurring nightmare that chipped away at my sense of agency and reinforced my misguided belief that the only way to navigate life was through an ever-increasing level of vigilance and control. I would frequently become consumed by the seemingly insignificant minutiae, obsessively analyzing every conceivable variable and potential contingency, engaging in an endless and mentally exhausting cycle of overthinking every possible scenario. And yet, the desired and stubbornly envisioned outcome often remained frustratingly and inexplicably beyond my tenacious grasp, leaving me feeling profoundly defeated, deeply disillusioned with the very notion of effort and planning, and increasingly resentful of the inherent unpredictability and apparent unfairness of the world around me. There was one particularly challenging period in my professional life that vividly illustrates this struggle. I had poured years of relentless dedication into building a business, meticulously crafting every detail, from the initial concept to the daily operations. I micromanaged every aspect, believing that my direct control was the only way to ensure success. I hired based on my precise criteria. I oversaw every marketing campaign, and I personally approved every significant decision. My waking hours were consumed by spreadsheets, projections, and endless meetings, all in a desperate attempt to maintain a tight grip on the reins of my creation. Sleep became a luxury, and genuine joy became a distant memory. Yet, despite my Herculean efforts, the business began to falter. Market trends shifted in unexpected ways. Key employees left for unforeseen reasons, and a major partnership that I had painstakingly cultivated dissolved due to circumstances entirely beyond my control. The more tightly I tried to hold on, the more rapidly things seemed to slip away. The carefully constructed edifice I had built with such obsessive control began to crumble, leaving me feeling not only professionally devastated, but also personally betrayed by a world that refused to bend to my will. This experience forced me to confront the stark reality of my limitations and the inherent unpredictability of external forces, planting the first seeds of doubt in my unwavering belief in the absolute power of control. Similarly, in my personal relationships, this same tendency towards control manifested in ways that ultimately proved detrimental. I would attempt to orchestrate interactions, anticipate needs before they were expressed, often incorrectly, and subtly steer loved ones towards what I perceived to be their best interests, often disregarding their own desires and perspectives. That I operated under the misguided assumption that my way was the right way, and that by exerting a gentle or a not-so-gentle form of control, I was actually being helpful and supportive. This often led to friction, resentment, and a growing sense of distance in my closest connections. My attempts to create harmonious and predictable relationships ironically resulted in the very opposite. A landscape of unspoken frustrations and unmet needs. That it was through the pain of these relational breakdowns that I began to glimpse the possibility that perhaps true connection and love flourished not through control, but through trust, vulnerability, and a willingness to allow others to be who they truly are, independent of my carefully laid plans. The initial steps I took on this journey toward trust were tentative and often fraught with skepticism. My ingrained need for tangible proof and logical explanations clashed directly with the abstract and often intangible nature of faith. I began by tentatively exploring different avenues, seeking intellectual understanding before emotional acceptance. I remember picking up a collection of essays by philosophers who grappled with questions of faith and meaning. I approached these texts with a critical eye, dissecting arguments and searching for logical inconsistencies. While some ideas resonated intellectually, they often failed to penetrate the deeper layers of my fear and anxiety. I also began a hesitant exploration of prayer, initially viewing it as a last resort, a desperate plea to a universe I didn't fully believe in. My early prayers felt awkward and self-conscious, more like a recitation of desires than a genuine connection with something beyond myself. Meditation proved equally challenging. My mind, accustomed to constant analysis and control, rebelled against the stillness, bombarding me with a relentless stream of thoughts and worries. Yet, despite these initial hurdles and the persistent voice of skepticism within me, a tiny seed of curiosity had been planted, a faint whisper of possibility that perhaps there was more to life, more to navigating its complexities than my own limited understanding could grasp. The exploration phase was far from a linear progression of unwavering belief. It was a winding path marked by significant challenges and persistent doubts that often threatened to derail my nascent faith. There were times when unanswered prayers left me feeling abandoned and questioning the very existence of a benevolent force. I remember praying with fervent intensity for a specific outcome during a particularly difficult financial period, believing that if I just had enough faith, a miracle would occur. When that miracle didn't materialize in the way I had envisioned, a wave of anger and disillusionment washed over me. I felt foolish for having placed my hope in something intangible, and a familiar voice of self-reliance roared back, urging me to take matters back into my own hands, to trust only in what I could see and control. I also encountered instances of hypocrisy and negativity within religious communities that shook my faith. Witnessing actions that seemed to contradict the very principles being preached created a deep sense of cognitive dissonance and made me question the authenticity of the entire endeavor. Furthermore, experiencing further setbacks and hardships, even as I began to explore faith, often led to moments of profound doubt. The logical part of my mind would argue that if this path of trust was truly beneficial, my life should be getting easier, not harder. These periods of doubt were crucial, however, as they forced me to confront my preconceived notions and to delve deeper into the true meaning of trust, realizing that it wasn't a guarantee of a trouble-free existence, but rather a different way of navigating the inevitable challenges. However, within this often turbulent exploration, there were also profound and significant experiences that began to shape my path in unexpected and deeply meaningful ways. I recall one instance when I was feeling particularly lost and overwhelmed by a complex personal situation. I had exhausted all logical avenues and felt utterly devoid of solutions. In a moment of complete surrender, I simply asked for guidance, not expecting any immediate answer. Later that day, I stumbled upon a passage in a book I had picked up months earlier but never read. The passage spoke directly to the core of my struggle, offering a perspective I had never considered. It wasn't a magical solution, but it provided a crucial shift in my thinking, opening up new possibilities and a renewed sense of hope. It felt less like a coincidence and more like a gentle nudge, a subtle indication that perhaps I wasn't as alone as I thought. There were also unexpected connections with people who entered my life at precisely the moments I needed them most. A chance encounter with a stranger who shared a piece of wisdom, a heartfelt conversation with a long-lost friend who offered unwavering support. These seemingly random interactions often provided the exact encouragement and guidance I needed to keep moving forward on my journey of faith. Looking back, these moments felt like breadcrumbs along the path, subtle reminders that even when I couldn't see the entire way, there was a guiding presence offering sustenance and direction. The pivotal moment, the true climax of this journey from anxious control to hopeful trust, wasn't a sudden, dramatic revelation accompanied by thunderous pronouncements or blinding lights. Instead, it was a gradual and profound shift in my inner landscape, a quiet and deeply personal transformation that culminated in an undeniable and unwavering sense of guidance and clarity. It wasn't an audible voice from the heavens or a detailed blueprint of my future that materialized before me. Instead, it was a deep, intuitive knowing that resonated within the very core of my being, a sense of inner peace that transcended logic and understanding. This shift occurred during a period of intense personal struggle, a time when I had exhausted all my own resources and strategies and had finally reached the point of complete surrender. I remember one particular evening, sitting in quiet contemplation, feeling utterly drained and defeated by my relentless attempts to control a situation that was clearly beyond my grasp. In that moment of profound surrender, a sense of calm washed over me, a feeling of letting go of the need to force an outcome and simply trusting that whatever unfolded would ultimately be for the best. It was in that quiet acceptance that the persistent chatter of my anxious mind began to subside, replaced by a deep and abiding sense of peace, a quiet confidence that even in the midst of uncertainty, I was not truly alone. This wasn't a one-time event, but rather the culmination of the often challenging journey I had been on, a gradual softening of my rigid grip on control and an opening of my heart to the possibility of something more. It was the moment when trust truly took root, moving from an intellectual concept to a deeply felt reality. The transformation that followed wasn't a magical erasure of all difficulties or a guarantee of a perpetually smooth and effortless existence. Challenges still arose, storms still gathered on the horizon, and moments of doubt still occasionally surfaced. However, the fundamental difference lay in my way of navigating these inevitable aspects of life. I learned that trust wasn't about expecting a life devoid of hardship, but rather about having a steadfast anchor to hold onto amidst the turbulence. A deep inner knowing that even when the waves crashed around me, there was a deeper current of support and guidance. Instead of reacting with immediate fear and frantic attempts to regain control, I began to approach challenges with a sense of quiet resilience, trusting in my ability to weather the storm and believing that even difficult experiences could hold valuable lessons and ultimately lead to growth. The pervasive anxiety that had once been my constant companion began to recede, replaced by a growing sense of inner peace and a quiet confidence in the unfolding of life's journey. The fear of the unknown didn't vanish entirely, but it was now tempered by a profound sense of hope and the unwavering belief that I was not alone in navigating its uncertainties. This newfound trust allowed me to approach decisions with greater clarity and less agonizing over every potential outcome. It's a journey, not a destination, and there will be moments of doubt and uncertainty along the way. But I can assure you that the rewards, a deeper sense of peace, greater resilience in the face of adversity, and a more profound connection to the beauty and mystery of life, are immeasurable. Embrace the courage to let go, to surrender your grip on the illusion of control, and to open your heart to the transformative power of trust. You might just discover a peace you never thought possible. One of the significant hurdles in cultivating trust is often the deep-seated fear of vulnerability. In a world that often equates strength with independence and self-reliance, the act of trusting can feel like relinquishing control and exposing ourselves to potential disappointment or even harm. We build walls around our hearts, meticulously guarding our vulnerabilities, believing that this is the only way to protect ourselves. However, this very act of self-protection can become a prison, isolating us from the very connections and support that can enrich our lives and provide a sense of belonging. Learning to trust involves the courageous act of lowering these walls, of allowing ourselves to be seen and known, imperfections and all. It's about recognizing that true strength lies not in impenetrable self-sufficiency, but in the willingness to be open and receptive to the support and love that others and a higher power can offer. This vulnerability, while initially frightening, is the fertile ground in which trust can take root and flourish. It requires a shift in perspective, from viewing vulnerability as a weakness to recognizing it as a courageous act of connection and a necessary component of authentic living. Past negative experiences can also create significant barriers to trust that if we have been hurt or betrayed in the past, it can be incredibly challenging to open ourselves up to trust again. The scars of past wounds can serve as constant reminders of potential pain, making us hesitant to lower our defenses and risk being hurt again. This is a natural human response, a protective mechanism designed to prevent future suffering. However, holding on to past hurts can also prevent us from experiencing new possibilities for connection and support. Healing from past betrayals and learning to trust again is a process that requires time, self-compassion, and often the support of others. It involves acknowledging the pain of the past without allowing it to dictate the possibilities of the future. It's about recognizing that while the past may have brought hurt, it does not define the potential for positive experiences and trustworthy relationships in the present and future. Learning to discern who is worthy of our trust, while still remaining open to connection, is a delicate balancing act that requires wisdom and self-awareness. Furthermore, the modern world often fosters a culture that values certainty and predictability. We are bombarded with information, statistics, and expert opinions, all in an attempt to make sense of an inherently uncertain world and to feel a sense of control over our outcomes. This cultural emphasis on certainty can make the concept of trusting in something unseen or unproven feel unsettling and even illogical. We are conditioned to rely on tangible evidence and measurable results, making the leap of faith that trust often requires seem daunting. However, life is inherently unpredictable. No matter how meticulously we plan or how diligently we strive for certainty, Unexpected events and unforeseen circumstances will inevitably arise. Learning to trust is not about denying this inherent uncertainty, but about finding a sense of peace and stability within it. It's about recognizing that while we may not always know what the future holds, we can trust in our ability to navigate whatever comes our way, supported by our inner strength and a belief in a larger, more benevolent order. Cultivating trust is not a passive endeavor. It requires active engagement and a conscious choice to shift our focus and our way of being in the world. One practical step is to begin by noticing the small instances of trust that already exist in our lives. We trust the sun to rise each morning, we trust the ground to support our steps, and we trust countless individuals in our daily interactions. Acknowledging these everyday acts of trust can help to build a foundation for extending that trust to larger and more significant aspects of our lives. Another important practice is to cultivate mindfulness and presence. When we are fully present in the moment, we are less likely to be consumed by anxieties about the future or regrets about the past, both of which can erode our ability to trust in the present unfolding of life. Engaging in practices such as meditation or simply paying attention to our breath can help to anchor us in the present moment and foster a greater sense of inner calm and trust. Furthermore, seeking out and nurturing supportive relationships can significantly enhance our ability to trust. Connecting with individuals who are trustworthy, compassionate, and supportive can create a safe space for vulnerability and can provide a sense of belonging and reassurance. Sharing our fears and uncertainties with trusted friends or mentors can help to alleviate the burden of carrying them alone and can offer new perspectives and encouragement. Conversely, it is also important to be mindful of the relationships in our lives that may erode our trust and to set healthy boundaries to protect our emotional well-being. Exploring different philosophical and spiritual perspectives on trust and surrender can also provide valuable insights and guidance. Many wisdom traditions emphasize the importance of letting go of attachment to specific outcomes and trusting in a larger cosmic order or divine plan. Studying these perspectives can offer a broader framework for understanding the role of trust in a meaningful life and can provide solace and inspiration during times of uncertainty. Whether through prayer, meditation, or simply spending time in nature, connecting with something larger than ourselves can foster a sense of interconnectedness and trust in the inherent goodness and unfolding wisdom of the universe. Ultimately, the journey of cultivating trust is a deeply personal and ongoing process. There will be moments of doubt, setbacks, and times when it feels easier to revert to old patterns of control. However, with patience, self-compassion, and a persistent willingness to open ourselves to the possibility of something more, we can gradually cultivate a deeper and more abiding sense of trust in ourselves, in others, and in the unfolding of life itself. This trust, once cultivated, becomes a powerful source of inner strength, resilience, and peace, allowing us to navigate the inevitable storms of life with greater grace and a quiet confidence in the journey ahead. It is in this surrender, this letting go of the illusion of absolute control, that we often find the very peace and direction we have been so desperately seeking. The path of trust is not always easy, but it is a path that ultimately leads to a more authentic, more joyful, and more fulfilling way of being in the world. It is a journey of growth, resilience, and the profound discovery of our own inner strength, supported by a connection to something larger and more benevolent than ourselves. Now, I want to invite you to reflect on your own experiences. What has your journey with trust looked like? Have there been moments of surrender that have led to unexpected peace or clarity? Or perhaps you are currently navigating the challenges of learning to trust in the face of uncertainty. Whatever your story, I encourage you to share it in the comments below. Your insights and experiences can offer invaluable support and encouragement to others who are also on this path, that if this exploration of trust has resonated with you, and if you believe that its message could benefit others, please consider giving this content a like. Your engagement helps to amplify its reach and allows it to connect with those who may be seeking solace and guidance. And if you're interested in delving deeper into topics related to personal growth, inner peace, and the transformative power of trust, I invite you to subscribe to this channel. I regularly share insights, reflections, and practical tools that I hope will illuminate your own journey and inspire you to live with greater courage and authenticity. Thank you for being here, for sharing your time and attention. Your presence and participation are deeply valued. Remember that the journey of trust is a shared one, and that we can all draw strength and inspiration from one another. May you find peace and empowerment as you embrace the path of trust in your own life.